I knew I was about to get blindsided the second Eric Dalton's voice cracked across the open floor like a cheap firecracker. He stood at the edge of my cubicle, red-faced and huffing like he'd just sprinted a mile in dress shoes, all over a sandwich. "You're fired," he barked. "That's misuse of company property." He gestured at the half-eaten turkey and Swiss I'd been chewing on like I'd just embezzled 6 figures through a hoagie. My mouth was still full. I blinked twice, waiting for a punchline. There wasn't one. Just 30 pairs of eyes peeking over monitors, pretending they weren't watching a grown man lose his mind over deli meat. You'd think there was more to it, like I'd set fire to the server room or cursed out the CEO. Nope. Just a leftover sandwich from a canceled client lunch, one of several sitting in the break room fridge, unlabeled and unclaimed. I'd even wrapped extras for the janitorial crew before. But this time, I was apparently the villain. This time, Eric had a point to make, and that point was sticking out the side of my rye bread with horseradish. 12 years. That's how long I'd been keeping Dalton and Cody stitched together with duct tape and grace. I ran operations like a wartime nurse, calm on the outside, calculating chaos on the inside. Client logistics, vendor renewals, supply restocks, IT emergencies, even the company holiday party seating chart. I handled it all quietly, efficiently. No fanfare, no tantrums in front of the team over finger food. Eric, on the other hand, was 3 months into his shiny new role as VP of Operations. You could already smell the nepotism clinging to him like cologne. He wasn't promoted because he was competent. He was promoted because his golf swing made the regional VP snort laugh over beers in Scottsdale. Still, I played nice. I trained him on our internal systems, walked him through workflows, even covered when he forgot to file a compliance report that could have cost us a vendor. And this was how he repaid me. Fired over a sandwich. No write-up, no sit-down, no HR mediation. Just red-faced yelling and a call to security like I was sneaking the Mona Lisa out in my lunchbox. He even tried to make it a spectacle. Told me I was setting a dangerous precedent, like I'd declared martial law over roast beef. If you're wondering why someone would lose their grip on reality over a slice of meat and bread, here's a hint. Guilt makes noise. And Eric had plenty. 3 days earlier, he'd emailed me close to midnight, asking me to retroactively approve a $27,000 executive morale dinner charged to our internal wellness budget. I flagged it, said it violated policy and would raise questions during the next audit. He replied, "Just get it done, Sarah." I didn't, and that, my friends, was the real crime, not the sandwich, the silence. My refusal to lie, to fix, to cover up one more indulgent spending spree disguised as leadership development. So, when he made his grand show of discipline, I didn't cry or argue. I stood, wiped my mouth, folded the sandwich wrapper like a flag at half-mast, and placed it delicately in the trash. Then I handed him my ID badge, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "That was a damn good sandwich, Eric." Before I walked out, I did one more thing. I sat down at the visitor kiosk, logged into my personal backup drive, and uploaded everything. Emails, receipts, Slack threads, calendar invites, screenshots of his sushi lunches labeled strategic planning, the Vegas retreat disguised as a remote leadership summit, even that $27,000 steakhouse bill titled Employee Engagement. 10 minutes later, a clean, polished memo sat in my drafts. Eric Dalton, Expense Irregularities FY24. One click later, it was on its way to the Ethics Committee's inbox. No CC, no drama, just quiet precision. As I walked out past reception, the front desk guard offered me a mint. I took 2. You see, people like me, the ones who stay late, clean up messes, and remember everyone's kids' soccer schedules, we also notice the irregularities. We remember the lies, and sometimes we write them all down. The silence after Eric's outburst lasted longer than it should have. You'd think someone had pulled the fire alarm or confessed to murder. He stood there, chest heaving, crumbs of my sandwich still on his breath like the smell alone offended his bloodline. "That's misuse of company property," he repeated, louder this time, as if volume might make it true. I didn't flinch. Everyone else froze. It didn't even feel real. Not at first. My brain filed it under Eric's usual Tuesday theatrics, until I saw Linda from HR pop her head up like a prairie dog, eyes darting between us. She had that look HR people get when they realize the Titanic's hit the iceberg and they're the ones stuck writing the report on the drowning. "I'm going to need your badge," Eric said, lowering his voice to sound authoritative. "Immediately. You violated company policy." I unclipped it from my lanyard, set it next to my coffee mug, the one that said running on caffeine and compliance forms, and said nothing. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow, like the oxygen had been replaced with recycled office air and toner dust. "Sarah, HR will follow up about your offboarding," Linda murmured, her voice as dry as printer paper. She didn't look me in the eye. No one did. Even Mark from sales, the same guy I'd once saved during an RFP submission, pretended to be deep in a spreadsheet, though his monitor clearly showed his fantasy football draft. I was fired over a sandwich, but not really. This wasn't about food. It was about panic. Eric's panic. The kind you can smell from across an open floor plan. Because 5 days earlier, he'd slid into my inbox with a favor. A request to backdate a $27,000 steakhouse dinner during an active expense freeze. I'd reminded him gently, attached the legal memo with the big red no exceptions box. He told me to just push it through. I didn't. That's when things changed. His tone, his attitude, the way he stopped CCing me on project threads. He even forwarded a vendor invoice with my name crossed out and his scrawled in Sharpie like we were kids passing notes in detention. So yeah, firing me over a sandwich? Pure theater. A desperate attempt to rewrite the story before someone else did. HR backed it, of course. Zero tolerance. Misuse of resources. "Food hygiene," Linda said, like I'd unleashed a raccoon in the boardroom. I just nodded, gathered my things. Water bottle, backup chargers, the Post-its with Wi-Fi passwords only I knew. I left the framed photo of my dog. Figured Eric could stare into those judgmental eyes every time he tried to expense another round of surf and turf under team building. No exit interview. No thank you for 12 years of stability. Just the soft beep of the badge scanner as I walked out into the sunlight. Funny thing is, I didn't feel fury or shame. I felt stillness, the kind that hits right before a thunderstorm when the world holds its breath. The first 2 days afterward were sludge. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister, not my trivia group, not even my dog walker, who probably noticed I was suddenly home to hand her cash instead of leaving it in the ceramic frog by the porch. I still woke up at 6:30, brewed coffee, checked my inbox like some phantom job might materialize. Then I'd scroll job boards full of slogans like, "We're like family," which, given recent events, sounded more like a threat. I almost wrote an email to HR, something formal, citing policy and tenure, maybe even demanding reinstatement. I even opened a blank doc. But as I sat there, watching my cursor blink like it was judging me, I realized this wasn't about me. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about a man who thought I was dangerous because I said no. And he couldn't afford that kind of no. So I deleted the draft, opened another folder, and started pulling files. Because villains, as it turns out, keep receipts. I've always kept records. Not out of paranoia, at least not at first, but because no one ever remembered the things I did. I was the one who forwarded critical approvals at 9 p.m., who scanned receipts, who flagged weird discrepancies that everyone else shrugged off. I didn't hoard data. I archived survival. And now, it was time to use it. My old external hard drive sat in a drawer labeled 2009 Taxes, a decoy name for something far more valuable. Inside were 6 months of audit trails tied to Eric Dalton's expense files. Inflated catering orders labeled working lunch but billed to departments that didn't exist. Spa invoices tagged as wellness retreats. A 4,800 sushi dinner categorized as client onboarding, even though there hadn't been a new client that month. And of course, the infamous $27,000 steakhouse dinner, dated 2 days after the company-wide expense freeze. Every email thread, every "just get it done," every polite refusal from me. Click. Saved. I opened a spreadsheet and began building my case. Not out of spite, but precision. Columns for transaction dates, vendor names, categories, amounts, justification fields. Screenshots attached where necessary. Calendar invites cross-referenced against actual expense logs. I built timelines, highlighted inconsistencies, annotated every approval chain like I was writing a dissertation on corporate fraud. It took 5 straight hours. No breaks, no shower, just me, my laptop, and a quiet determination that didn't feel angry so much as surgical. When I finished, I saved the file under a new title. Eric Dalton, Expense Irregularities FY24. Then I opened the internal ethics portal, the one they only mentioned during compliance week before tossing out branded stress balls. The site looked like it hadn't been updated since the Obama era, but it still functioned. I filled out my information, ticked the confidential submission box, uploaded the file, and hit send. A single confirmation popped up. Your report has been received. No confetti, no applause, just a blinking message and silence. I closed my laptop and leaned back, the air around me still. Not bitter, not triumphant, just calm. I knew exactly how this would play out. Eric would scramble. He'd lie. He'd spin a story about me being disgruntled and unstable. HR would parrot his script, call me a poor fit. It didn't matter. I'd already made my move. Quiet moves are the ones that stick. 3 days later, I got my first sign that the walls were shaking. A buddy from IT, well, more like a hallway acquaintance who used to steal my peppermints, forwarded me a screenshot. No context, just the subject line of an internal email. Urgent, compliance request, FY24, expense documentation. Sent from the CFO's office, CC'd to legal, BCC'd to who knows who. By day 5, rumors swirled. Eric was panicking. I didn't even need confirmation. You could feel it. The man couldn't tie his shoes without a calendar invite. The moment someone in finance asked for a master ledger, I knew he was in his glass-walled office, sweating through his slim-fit blazer. People noticed the shift. Finance flagged a $14,000 charge labeled strategic alignment that turned out to be a tequila-soaked yacht party with executives and a procurement rep named T-Bone. Boat rental alone cost more than my monthly rent. Pictures surfaced on social media. Eric, shirtless, tagged. Then came the spa invoice, the one marked Team Detox, but billed on a Sunday. Attended only by Eric and 2 women from a consulting firm that didn't exist in our vendor database. HR tried to spin it as holistic morale building. Compliance was less poetic. They flagged it hard. Eric's behavior shifted from smug to frantic. He started pulling interns into his office, accusing them of misfiling receipts, berating analysts for missing attachments, even hinting at conspiracies. One poor kid left the building in tears after being blamed for a breakfast invoice. 3 lobster omelets and a Bloody Mary flight. And me? I stayed silent. No calls, no posts, no emails. Because I knew what was coming next. The audit had begun. Her name was Angela Patel, and she didn't come from the world of golf trips and motivational PowerPoints. She came from Deloitte. Big 4, razor sharp, no patience for charm or corporate theater. People said she could smell a misfiled receipt from 50 feet away. When she walked into Dalton & Company, She didn't ask for introductions, she asked for numbers. And the numbers, as it turned out, smelled like shrimp left too long in a filing cabinet. Her first move was surgical. A full audit of all non-salary expenditures for FY24, starting with departments that had overspent their discretionary budgets by more than 30%. Guess who landed right at the top? Eric Dalton, VP of Operations, proud owner of a $250,000 expense category labeled Executive Development Events. Angela dug in. The term executive development had apparently covered everything from oyster towers to karaoke nights in private rooms. There were no event reports, no measurable outcomes, just the same excuse typed in lowercase on every form: team building. Then she stumbled on something else, a termination report from Eric's division. My name, reason, theft of company property, not money, not hardware, food, a sandwich. Angela paused, reread, and flipped to the invoice log for the same week. There it was, a $4,450 lunch for pre-deal nourishment, including 16 orders of filet sliders and 12 bottles of sparkling rosé. She made a note in the margin: investigate inconsistency. By the time her team opened Eric's catering folder, they practically needed a forklift. $500,000 in meals, all buried under euphemisms like strategic digestion and cognitive fuel activation. Some invoices didn't even list what was served, just meal experience for 10. Every single one had Eric's signature. When Angela requested access to the internal ethics portal, she found my report sitting there. 34 pages of receipts, emails, and timelines cross-referenced to the minute. Each page meticulous, each note circled in red, every dollar traced. On top of the file, I'd left one line: termination reason does not align with expense history. Recommend full review. Angela didn't smile. She wasn't the smiling type, but she did close the folder slowly, picked up the phone, and told her team, "Get me every transaction Eric Dalton touched in the last 12 months. Food first." That's when the real fun began. While Eric tried to charm HR into rewriting timelines, Angela and her auditors began cross-checking data. Eric thought he was in control, spinning his misunderstanding narrative. He scheduled what he called a clarification session. Angela called it round one. He strutted into the glass-walled conference room, half-buttoned blazer, fake confidence, PowerPoint loaded with corporate buzzwords. "It's unfortunate this whole situation began with one employee's misunderstanding of policy," he said. "He meant me. Of course he did. He framed me as the disgruntled legacy employee who couldn't adapt to new leadership dynamics." HR nodded like bobbleheads. Eric even highlighted a years-old anonymous survey comment about resistance to cultural change, pretending it was gospel. He tossed out phrases like scaling trust and emotional capital, words that melted on contact with reality. Angela let him talk. Then she turned her laptop toward HR and clicked. The spreadsheet glowed. Transaction logs, vendor lists, timestamps, all there. She scrolled to one line item: the steakhouse dinner, $27,000, filed under March. The dinner happened in April, 2 days after the expense freeze. Next to it, the email chain. Eric's 11:43 p.m. request, my 7:02 a.m. refusal, his follow-up asking me to backdate it so it doesn't get stuck in legal. Angela didn't raise her voice. She just asked HR, "Would you call this a misunderstanding of policy?" HR said nothing. Eric fidgeted. His ties suddenly seemed too tight. Angela's tone dropped to a whisper made of steel. "Integrity isn't optional." And in that moment, the air shifted. The audit had found its heartbeat. Eric tried to recover with that practiced smirk, the kind executives use when their confidence starts to crack, but they still think charisma can outrun math. "Look," he said, hands raised, voice trembling just slightly. "Sarah's documentation is thorough, sure, but it lacks context. Her role wasn't to question leadership, It was to support it. Angela didn't blink. So, when she refused to falsify a date on a restricted expenditure, she asked evenly, that was her failure? Eric opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Angela clicked another tab. Audit access logs. 4 separate instances of Eric logging into the internal audit system with no assigned tasks, each session aligning with deleted expense threads. One, dated June 14th, matched perfectly with a missing invoice from a boutique seafood caterer billing $9,100 for a so-called Product Vision dinner. Attendees, Eric and 2 golf buddies. The deletion timestamp matched the login to the minute. The room went quiet. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the nervous click of a pen from someone in HR. Angela turned the screen toward the CFO, who sat motionless. And that's not all, she said. Someone attempted to retroactively edit an approval PDF, replacing Sarah Monroe's initials with Eric Dalton's. Metadata confirms it happened 3 weeks after her termination. Eric swallowed hard. That's impossible, he muttered, but his voice had lost its authority. Angela opened a printed folder and laid down a single sheet. Version control, she said. Sarah kept mirrored backups, date-stamped, labeled, archived externally. Every invoice has a trail. She tapped the page. This one is named Dalton AUD424.pdf. The system record shows Eric's access and revision attempt logged at 11:58 p.m. She turned to the room. That, she said, is what integrity looks like when it's documented. The shift was visible, an entire room tilting its sympathy. Suddenly, it wasn't about Eric's easy charm or who laughed at his happy hour jokes. The power had moved, quietly and decisively, toward the truth. 2 weeks later, the external auditors arrived. You could feel it before you saw it, the kind of silence that clings to walls. No morning chatter, no microwave hum, no fake cheerfulness. Just fear. The building itself seemed to be holding its breath. Eric tried to act unfazed. Routine check, he told his assistant, waving off her panic. Probably just cross-verifying post-merger expenses. But the poor woman looked like she hadn't slept in days, eyes puffy, nails bitten to the quick. She'd spent 72 hours trying to reconcile hundreds of food invoices that didn't add up. Here's the thing about expense fraud. It doesn't age well. The stories rot faster than the food. Calendar invites contradict receipts. Attendees don't match expense justifications. Lies curdle. Angela arrived 5 minutes before the board meeting. No laptop bag, no coffee, just a thick black binder under her arm, the title printed in cold Arial font. Executive Expenses. Eric Dalton. She didn't greet him, didn't even glance his way as she entered conference room B. Nicknamed the icebox because the AC never worked, and humiliation always felt colder behind glass walls. The board filed in, legal counsel joined by Zoom, HR lined the back wall like nervous statues. Eric sat at the far end of the table, trying to look relaxed. He leaned back, fingers laced, a little too casual. Angela walked to the center of the table, set down the binder, and let it thud against the wood. No preamble, no theatrics. On top of that binder was a single sheet of paper. My termination report. Reason for dismissal. Unauthorized consumption of company property. Sandwich. Clipped beside a scanned receipt for a $27,000 steakhouse dinner, dated during the expense freeze. The CEO's eyes narrowed. The CFO leaned forward. Angela didn't say a word. The room froze. The CEO flipped through the first few pages slowly, each turn of paper sounding louder than it should have. The fluorescent lights hummed. No one dared move. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured, almost too calm. Ms. Patel, he said, walk us through this. Angela clasped her hands behind her back. We conducted a full audit of discretionary and departmental spending under Mr. Dalton's authority for fiscal year 24, she began. We identified a recurring pattern of miscategorization, backdated approvals, and misallocated funds totaling approximately $523,000. Eric gave a short, nervous laugh. That's exaggerated. Vendors make mistakes all the time. You know how messy the coding system can get. Angela didn't look up. 6 of your vendors, she said, flipping a page, used identical phrasing in their invoices. Executive morale enhancement. That's not standard language. It's copy-pasted from your original template. She slid the binder toward the CFO. The CFO, a quiet man known for dissecting budgets like a surgeon, read silently for a minute. Then his eyes lifted to Eric. And you fired someone over a sandwich? Eric straightened. That employee exhibited a pattern of behavior. It wasn't about the food. Angela's gaze sharpened. Then why does the report only mention the sandwich? No prior write-ups, no HR records, no documented warnings, just one line. Misuse of company property, unauthorized food consumption. A muffled laugh came from the end of the table. Someone tried to cover it with a cough. Eric's face turned crimson. This isn't productive, he said quickly. We're blowing things out of proportion. Angela shut the binder with a soft snap. There are 15 flagged receipts in this report, all vague, none attached to measurable business outcomes. The earliest is from 2 weeks after your promotion. The latest, last month. The CEO leaned forward. Every one of them approved by you? Angela nodded. Many without secondary authorization. The CFO exhaled. Who was the whistleblower? Angela didn't turn her head, but her pause was enough. The air shifted. Eric's jaw tightened. She was terminated, Angela said finally, her tone flat, for eating a leftover sandwich from a canceled meeting. Value, $7.84. For a moment, the room went dead still. Eric reached for his water and missed the coaster. The binder sat open like a tombstone, the receipts its epitaph. The lead external auditor, a silver-haired woman with wire-rimmed glasses and the voice of a high school principal, lifted 2 pages from the stack. Page 1, she said. Termination report. Black and white. Unauthorized consumption of client-designated assets. Terminated for cause. She held up the second sheet. Page 2. A 14,800 seafood tower order. Labeled Team Bonding, Executive Tier. Signed by Eric Dalton. No client, no department, no attendees listed. She laid them side by side on the table. The termination was processed in under 12 hours, she continued. HR, legal, and operations all signed off without dispute. Yet this invoice, filed under a department that no longer exists, remained active in the system. No notes, no event record, no approval chain. The CFO leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Out of curiosity, how many of your 116 food-related expenses had full documentation? Angela didn't blink. 6? And the rest? 22 had date discrepancies, 9 were retroactively reclassified, and 1, she flipped the final page, was logged as mandatory morale injection and billed to the Diversity and Inclusion Fund. Eric's mouth twitched. Okay, he said, forcing a grin. Some of those were clerical issues, process gaps. We were under pressure after the merger. The CFO cut him off. You fired someone over a sandwich. The words landed like a hammer, flat, final, echoing. And in that silence, the balance shifted for good. The words hung in the air like a verdict. You could feel the weight of them, every syllable cracking through the boardroom glass like a hairline fracture spreading across ice. Eric tried to laugh again, that nervous, boyish laugh he used at networking events when he forgot someone's name. But this time, no one joined in. The CFO held up the whistleblower report, my report, its pages lined with red annotations and timestamps. The same employee you fired, he said, Provided a complete ledger of every questionable transaction you touched for 8 months. Vendor receipts, emails, approval logs, all corroborated. He paused. Most of which, incidentally, we couldn't retrieve from your system because someone purged 3 months of archived data from your folder the week after her termination. Eric's mouth opened, but no words came out. From the far end of the table, one of the board members, Raymond, the one who almost never spoke, murmured, "You fired someone over a sandwich while billing us $500,000 in seafood towers." Another stifled a laugh but couldn't hold it. A few snorts, then a cough to disguise the sound. The veneer cracked. Eric's face drained of color. His jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscle jump. "I was told," he said, his voice thin now, "this was a review, not an inquisition. We agreed to focus on broader spending patterns." Angela finally looked at him. Her expression was neutral, almost bored. She flipped to one of the final pages in the binder and pushed it forward. "Would you like to explain this one? Strategic Energy Lunch, $6,400. No attendees listed." Eric's hand twitched. "That's not what it looks like," he stammered. The CEO, silent for nearly 20 minutes, leaned forward at last. His tone was calm, but each word was sharpened to a point. "Who approved all of this?" Eric's lips parted, searching for something, an excuse, a scapegoat, anything. But all that came out was noise. "The systems were loose, post-merger chaos. We were told to move fast, adapt, maintain morale." The CEO cut him off. "And the sandwich?" Eric's voice broke. "What about it?" Angela didn't miss a beat. She turned one last page, security footage, printed and time-stamped. Me, sitting at my cubicle, eating half of that leftover sandwich. The same day, Eric had submitted a $9,100 regional partnership development lunch. There were no regional partners. The silence that followed was surgical. It didn't need words. It sliced on its own. You could feel the temperature drop, see the realization crawl across every face in that glass-walled room. The auditor shut the binder with a sound that might as well have been a gavel. "Our recommendation," she said simply, "is immediate termination of Mr. Dalton's employment, effective today. Formal referral to external counsel for fraud review. The pattern of manipulated financial data warrants escalation." No shouting, no debate, just inevitability. Eric sat frozen, pupils dilated, staring at the polished table like it might offer a way out. HR didn't speak. Linda, pale and wordless, walked around to his side, palm open. He looked at her hand, then at the CEO, who simply closed his leather notebook. That was the signal. Eric reached into his blazer, pulled out his badge, and set it down. One soft plastic clink, final and hollow. The auditors began to pack their papers. Legal whispered something to the CFO, who nodded once. Chairs scraped against the floor, the sound of endings. And then, just as everyone began to file toward the door, Angela spoke, soft, almost conversational. "By the way," she said, slipping her binder into her bag, "she labeled every receipt, even the ones you said were misplaced." The movement stopped. No one said my name, but they didn't have to. Everyone knew. The woman fired for a sandwich was the reason the audit existed. An hour later, I was sitting at my favorite coffee shop. Small, quiet, imperfect. The Wi-Fi lagged, the mugs chipped, but no one rushed you out. I sipped my tea and opened my laptop. News spreads fast in corporate America. Stock down 3%. Whispers about internal mismanagement. My inbox pinged. A message from a consulting firm. "Hi, Sarah. We've been following your work. We'd love to discuss a compliance leadership role for 2025. I smiled. Not big, not triumphant, just real. The world had tilted slightly back toward balance. So yeah, they fired me for a sandwich. But the sandwich was never the scandal. The scandal was thinking that's all it was.